people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this, our first look at what is Naomi Valle's MVP debut in late June on the undercard of Jake Paul versus Chavez Jr. against experienced fighter, serviceable Ashley Felix. Naomi Valle sports an unblemished record of 14 wins with no losses, no draws, 9 knockouts against largely pedestrian-level competition. They've done a good job of keeping her active and keeping her busy and getting her rounds, but they haven't stepped her up yet. You could argue that this upcoming Ashley Felix fight is a step up in competition. Ashley Felix, who sports a professional record of 7 wins with 3 losses, no draws, 1 knockout, but in those fights that Ashley's had, she's come up against better fighters than the fighters that Naomi has fought. So even though Naomi has more fights than Ashley, it's a quality over quantity kind of deal. Suffered losses to both Brooke Cibrian, Guadalupe Medina. These are talented fighters, unbeaten up-and-comers. And win or lose, these are experiences that Ashley Felix has that Naomi Valle doesn't have. That Ashley, she's been matched tough. Currently coming off of 2 consecutive victories and 3 in her last 6. Last in action in February of this year, so she ain't got no ring rust to shake off. Something similar applies to Naomi. Naomi saw action in March. She fought about 4 times last year, and she's already fought once this one. This will be her second fight of this year in a light flyweight contest scheduled for 6. No bold presuppositions. Naomi Valle could lose this fight. She very well could. There's a danger to facing a fighter like Ashley Felix that doesn't have an O to protect and thus doesn't have anything to lose, so they can go for it. They can go balls deep. I've seen her, and she ain't half bad. She can move a bit, brawl a bit. She's got speed in those hands, quick combinations mid-range to inside, not necessarily the biggest puncher. She only has 1 recorded knockout, though as stated, there is a danger to facing a fighter like an Ashley Felix. You wonder if Naomi Valle is ready for it. We know she comes from good stock. I believe that her father was a boxer, and we know that her older sister is, Yokasta. Much like her older sister, Naomi Valle, she's got star quality, star potential. She recently won a Costa Rican version of Dancing with the Stars, so she's already amassed some celebrity in her homeland very early in her boxing career. By association with her older sister, who's well known out there, and of course, on that reality TV show. All of which means very little when the opening bell sounds and she has to deal with Ashley Felix. And like I said, Ashley's a live one. I wouldn't be surprised if Naomi lost this thing. Not saying she will, but this is a step up. This is an acid test.
No, it was definitely the funds. It was definitely that money. Like, he was trying to downplay us. Like, the initial offer was $750.
Yeah.
And I believe Stanionis' first offer was like 1.5 or something like that. Just going off rip. So it's just like, how? And then Barrios was even higher than that, I believe. So it's just like, how you just gonna try to downplay me? And just, I'm all the way down here off rip. So obviously you're not even trying to make the fight happen to begin with. So you tell me it's that good business right there. And then he turned around. Nobody else is doing this. Negotiations out here to the public. He out here, doing this, that, and the third, while we was in the background chilling. So you tell me it's that good business. Like I said, he promoted. So he doing a good job. He making boots seem like this, seem like that. But I'm bound to show y'all otherwise.
That is WBO welterweight champion Brian Norman once again asserting that the offers made to him by Eddie Hearn in Matchroom were not satisfactory, going as far as telling Marcos Villegas that he was lowballed. But bear in mind that we're talking about an undercard fighter, champion or otherwise. He's still fighting on undercards, and he has yet to have made the dollar amount that was offered to him by Matchroom, comparing it to what they offered Stanionis or what they offered Mario Barrios. Bear in mind that when they eat, you don't shit. Never mind what they offered them because you're not them. You last fought on Michaela Mayer's undercard. Top Rank doesn't have you headlining shows because you don't sell out arenas. You don't sell a bunch of tickets. So where do you get that Matchroom's supposed to break the piggy bank for you? And what is this era of self-entitled fighters and businessmen who think it's up to them to name their own commercial value? If you were worth what you were asking for, wouldn't your own promoter put it up? If you're the kind of guy that needs to be paid 1.5 or 1.7 or in excess of that, then why isn't Top Rank putting it up? Why'd they have you fighting on an undercard in your last fight, and why are they now shipping you out to Japan? It's always gonna come back to that, because Brian Norman has a promoter, a well-to-do promoter, one of the bigger ones, and they're not putting up that kind of scratch, so why are you expecting Matchroom to do that? What? Top Rank doesn't think you're worth $2 million, but Matchroom is supposed to? I don't know what specifically he's making for the Jin Sasaki fight that he's about to have in Japan. I imagine they may have offered him something close to $1 million, if not $1 million, but not $2. Not what he wants for Boots. If you even want to call it wanting Boots and wanting to fight, it seems more like extortion to me. You're holding the fight to ransom because you know that Boots wants to unify this division more than you do. As far as you're concerned, you can wait. It's not that big a deal to you like it is for Boots. The caveat with this strategy is at any point while you're waiting, things can go sideways. They have for other fighters in the past, they could go sideways for you. What if you go to Japan and lose? You lose your only bargaining chip. Good luck getting $2 million from Matchroom after that. Ever since this became a thing, I've heard one or two narratives levied against Matchroom that by the time that they made the offer to Brian Norman last year, they were already on the hook for the Karen Chukadzian fight, and thus the offer was not made in good faith. But that's not what Brian is saying. Brian is saying that it wasn't enough money. Compared to what other fighters, other champions were offered, the reason they didn't take it was because it wasn't enough money. Not because of the IBF, not because of Karen Chukadzian, not because of some deadline. It came down to the money. But if you liked your chances against Boots as much as you like your chances against Jin Sasaki, why wouldn't you have taken it? I do not think he's getting anywhere in the neighborhood of $2 million to fight Jin Sasaki. I think they offered him something decent, but not that much. So if you're comfortable flying halfway around the world for less money, why couldn't you just fight Boots right here? The answer is obvious.
But I'm saying for me as a fighter, bro, I don't want to fight no Alcatraz.
Okay, so you prefer the T-Mobile full arena.
Bro, there's just something about the fights is when
he's spoiled now, dude.
The fight week, bro. There's just the fight week. You see the fans. Yeah. Fans are riled up. You're going to the fight. You see all the fans. People going crazy. You come out. You do the ring walk. People are going crazy. There's nothing like that, bro. It's this shit. There's not a feeling I could compare to that. Honestly, now I enjoy that. I go out, I would do the ring walk, and I enjoy it, bro.
That is David Benavidez asserting that he's not a fan of these exotic locations where Turkey Alalshikh means to stage fights, and that's his prerogative. If he don't want to box on Turkey shows, that's fine. But bear in mind that bigger names than him have been boxing on Turkey shows. We're talking about Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk. Those guys have got way more fans than you do and make more money from those fans than you do. And if they don't have a problem boxing on Turkey shows, you shouldn't either. Canelo's not too good to box on Turkey shows, and he makes way more money than you do. He makes more money, way more, than everybody else in the sport. And he's all right with that arrangement, but you're not? Now, what I think it really is that he would prefer to stay on PBC Island because he knows they're a hell of a lot more invested in him than Turkey Alalshikh. The advantage of being the house fighter in all situations is what's keeping him there, even if it means making less money in the process, because let's be honest, David's been on pay-per-view about 3 times in shows that he's headlined. The Plant fight, the Andrade fight, and the Morrell fight. None of those fights did big numbers. The average boxing fan isn't very good at math, but when your numbers are hovering around 200,000 or less, you're not making very much. When you're talking about bringing in under 200,000 buys, consider that a sizable portion of whatever comes in has to go to the operational costs, the production, the promotion, the undercard fighters. You're not making very much, but if you were boxing on one of Turkey's shows, you don't need to worry about what the pay-per-view does, what it sells. You get your money up front. And if Turkey Alalshikh's money is green enough for Canelo and green enough for Terence Crawford, there's no reason it shouldn't be green enough for you. Now, we've been hearing the same thing from David Benavidez about the same names, that they're gunning for either an Anthony Yarde fight or a Callum Smith fight. Callum Smith, who was already offered to him by Turkey Alalshikh. You figure that if they would have played ball, the fight would have been done by now and set to go down over the summer months, if they would have bid, but they didn't. The conversation would have had a lot more traction, and all you've got to do is get through your fight camp to get ready. If you would have taken Turkey's offer the way you guys are playing it, maybe you get Callum, maybe you don't. The journos recently caught up with Callum Smith on the heels of his big win over Joshua Buatsi, and Callum Smith himself addressed the potentiality of a David Benavidez fight.
You've been linked to massive fights off the back of that. David Benavidez has mentioned Anthony Yarde. Now, there were reports that a fight with Anthony was like nearing completion, and Liam's just told us that he's sort of thinking that Benavidez is potentially more likely. Is there any light you can shed on what might be next?
Yeah, I've got a meeting with Eddie this week. He's away in Japan the weekend, and then I'm going to speak to him when he gets home. But I think people think the Yarde fight apparently was signed, sealed and done because of Tundi on TalkSport was doing what Tundi likes to do best. But no talks or movement on that fight at all from my side. I haven't heard nothing of it, and like I said, from what I'm hearing, the Benavidez one's probably a little bit further along in terms of talks and negotiations, even though that fight's nowhere near done. But
don't get too excited. According to Callum, the Benavidez fight is nowhere near done. Play it back for those who didn't catch it the first time.
Talks and negotiations, even though that fight's nowhere near done. But yeah, there's been no minor talks. What I hear from Eddie with PBC over getting the Benavidez fight done, but zero regarding Yarde so far. So no, we wait and see. But I'm in a good position regardless of who I fight next. It should be a good fight, and the goal remains the same. I want to be a 2A world champion, and I believe I'll beat whoever I have to get there.
What are your thoughts on David Benavidez as a fighter, especially since moving up to light heavyweight?
He's a really good fighter. I've knew of him for a long time. We were both world champion at the same time, down at 168, and I've always rated him a fighter. I like his personality. I think he's good for boxing, and I think stylistically we make a pretty good fight together. So it's definitely a fight that I always feel, like I said in another interview, I feel about to retire tomorrow. The one fight that I feel probably should have happened and never was the Benavidez one. Like I said, we were at 168 together. We were both massive 168, so both had the potential to move to 175. We both have now, so I think it's a fight that will happen at some point. Hopefully, it's next, and let's say he's WBC world champion now, so there's a lot more at stake.
So according to Callum, there have been more conversations about a Benavidez fight than a Yarde fight, but the Benavidez fight is nowhere near done. You have to consider what Callum's bargaining chips are, because he has them. Now, David Benavidez's WBC title, that is a bargaining chip in and of itself, as Callum means to become a 2-weight world champion, but he's got 2 ways of doing it. He can just grab the bull by the horns with David, or he can bide his time and wait for the winner of Better Be versus Bivol, at which point it becomes about what pays him more money. Fighting David in America, or waiting for the winner of that fight to potentially fight them in Saudi for a big Saudi bag. I said it in my previous video, and I'll say it here again. Smith versus Benavidez is a good fight for the hardcores, but it's not a hot ticket. It's not a big fight. A big fight that would get him a big purse. As the B-side to David Benavidez. And bear in mind, we are talking about a fight in America, because there's no way David's going to go to the UK for that fight. So if you're Callum, what do? When Eddie Hearn addressed these fights a little over a week ago, he also mentioned Callum having a homecoming fight that doesn't have to be against Anthony Yarde or David Benavidez. He can have a quick run out while he waits, a little tick over, an easy one. Likely wouldn't be for a whole lot of money, but it would allow him to stay active and bide his time while he waits for something bigger to come along. And the biggest fight that he can have in this division is against the winner of Better Be versus Bivol. More money, more belts. You have to wonder what Callum Smith is going to choose. For David Benavidez, that is the light at the end of the tunnel, though, that this is still a conversation. Callum hasn't made up his mind yet, but he has options, and having options is leverage unto itself. Don't forget, that he's already WBO interim champion. Fighting David may get him the crack at the apple that he's looking for, but he's already in position to get it without David. What that essentially means is he's not desperate, and he doesn't have to rush to judgment. No, he can take his time. Now, on the predication that he does decide to fight David Benavidez, well, I'm not against David Benavidez getting that fight, but I think it's ironic that so many of David's fans like to poo-poo all over Canelo's resume, and yet the best name on David's resume is a guy that Canelo beat, a guy that Canelo knocked out, in Caleb Plant, a guy that David didn't knock out. And now he's shooting for Callum Smith. Oh, is Callum suddenly a solid fighter? A solid name? Because when Canelo fought him, you called him a Euro bum. What are they going to call him if David can get him in the ring? Is that suddenly a solid victory? Can David get it? I think that, punch for punch, Callum Smith actually packs a bigger punch than David Benavidez. How so? Well, both boys are 2 or 3 fights into their light heavyweight campaigns, but only one guy is knocking people out, and that's Callum. He knocked out Lenin Castillo, he knocked out Matthew Bowderleek, he came close to knocking out Joshua Buatsi, but Joshua recovered, showed a good chin. Whereas David hasn't knocked anybody out since moving up to light heavyweight. He didn't knock out Vosdick, who's been knocked out before, just not by him, and he didn't knock out David Morrell. So in terms of power, I would give that edge to Callum Smith, but in terms of activity, I would give that edge to David Benavidez, that he is a particularly busy fighter in a fight, busy fighter in a round, albeit simple. So what David would have to do to get the best of Callum Smith is do what John Ryder did. Crash the pocket, get in his wheelhouse, make him uncomfortable, and back him off, while being busy. Put him on his back foot, put him on the ropes. Like Canelo Alvarez did, like Artur Beterbiev did. That's what David would have to do, what Callum would have to do. Don't let that happen. Set him up, because you can. We've seen defensive deficiencies in David Benavidez often enough that he can be caught. He has been caught 2 times. He was dropped years ago by Ronald Gavril, and more recently, he got dropped by David Morrell. That if they can drop you, Callum can drop you. You gotta maintain a bit of distance, beat those feet. As David inches forward to crash the pocket, he often squares up, and if you can catch him coming in, you can catch him off balance. He doesn't have the best feet, and he has a tendency to give his opponent both shoulders when firing combinations instead of staying side on. He's had that same deficiency for years, and he still has it now. For Callum to exploit it, he's got to beat those feet, don't stand in one spot, catch and counter. Catch and shoot! The bookies would likely have David Benavidez as the favorite going in just because Callum's lost 2 times already, losing to Canelo and losing to Artur Beterbiev. It's a bit of a short-sighted evaluation, but that is how I think they would have it. David would be the favorite just because he's the unbeaten fighter. But Callum would be live in that fight. He's a live animal. Do I think he has enough stopping power to stop David? I think he does, but he's got to deliver it. That's what it all boils down to. You can have buckets of power, but it don't mean nothing if you don't land, and you don't land if you don't throw. This is not the fight where Callum Smith can afford to get gun-shy. That's David's out in this fight. That activity has rendered Callum Smith gun-shy in the past. The other guy's volume, and David is a volume puncher.